بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه الطاهرين ما دام ما في السماوات والأرضين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم إنا نسألك علما ينفعنا اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وعملا متقبلا وشفاء من كل داء نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والإفادة والاستفادة والنفع والانتفاع والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم والدلالة إلى الخير والهدى برحمته وكرمه وإحسانه وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we thank and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all of His blessings that He has bestowed upon us. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you endeavor to count the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will not be able to do so. We thank and praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for affording us the opportunity to come to a gathering of learning whereby we seek to acquire such knowledge that will guide us to and guide us along the straight path. Indeed, our presence here is an indication of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes goodness for us. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wa sahbihi said, "May yuridillahu bihi khayran yufaqihu fid din." If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes goodness for a person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants that person understanding of his religion. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase us in our understanding of religion. We are deeply honored today to have with us the person of Munna Dawood. He is one of our seniors. I studied in Zakaria in 1994, and I was preceded by Munna Dawood. So he is in Quranic terms what we refer to as Sabiqun al-Awwalun, like the ancients, elders. So I don't know why I'm not nervous, but I'm not nervous. Normally when there's an elder, I'm very nervous. But it also talks about the gentle person of Munna Dawood. So we are deeply honored, and we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us through him, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our gathering through him, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts also this gathering through him, inshallah, bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we continue with our reading of Babu Talaq. And yesterday we started off by mentioning that there are three types, or if you wanted to, three modes, three modalities of issuing a divorce. We had also discussed the different rulings in relation to a divorce. And the ruling is a relative ruling. In certain instances, it is necessary. In certain instances, it is impermissible. In certain instances, it is reprehensible. Certain instances, it is recommended. And there are also instances that Imam al-Haramain and others mention that issuing a divorce becomes religiously neutral, what we refer to in Arabic as mubah. Thereafter, we looked at the modalities, the modes of issuing a divorce. A person is resolved, he's going to issue the divorce. There are three ways in which a person can issue a divorce, or three modalities of divorce. The one we started discussing yesterday says sunniyun. In other words, the recommended manner of issuing a divorce. And that is that the person issues the divorce in a clean period in which he did not have conjugal relations with his wife. He should not have had conjugal relations neither in the clean period nor in the menses preceding that. So if a person wants to divorce his wife, the recommended manner of issuing the divorce is to do so in a clean period in which he did not have intercourse with her. We had alluded and indicated to the proof, and inshallah today we'll read through the narration of Abdullah ibn Umar in that particular regard. I was thinking of skimming over it, but the wording has a great many benefit for us, inshallah, and we pray that Allah causes us to benefit from the wording of this particular narration. It reads as follows. وفي الصحيحين أن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما طلق امرأته وهي حائض. It appears in both Bukhari and Muslim that Abdullah ibn Umar, who is the son of Umar, that he had divorced his wife وهي حائض, while she was in her menses. So in terms of our categorization now, what type of talaq would this be? We only did the first one, the recommended one. So it doesn't fall in the recommended category. It's going to fall in the second category. The second category our scholars refer to as talaq bid'i muharram. it is an impermissible mode of issuing the divorce. The divorce is going to fall, but the manner in which the divorce was enacted, that manner is impermissible. So Abdullah ibn Umar, in this particular instance, is guilty of issuing a divorce in the inappropriate manner. So Umar radiallahu anhu brings the case to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. فذكر ذلك عمر للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to him, مره فليراجعها. That Abdullah ibn Umar, he divorced his wife while she was in the menses. Command him, in other words, order him to take her back. فليراجعها, he should take her back. ثم ليمسكها حتى تحيض. And then he should hold on to her until she enters into her menses. ثم تطهر. And then she enters into a clean period. Brothers following? So he divorced in the menses. Tell him to take her back. So she's still in the menses. Then she comes into a clean period. So you would expect now that Abdullah ibn Umar, if he wants to divorce her, the Prophet ﷺ is going to say to him that since she now entered into a clean period, that you can now issue the divorce. But the Prophet ﷺ doesn't do that. He says, ثُمَّ تَحِيضُ. So she's in menses, take her back. She goes into a clean period. After that clean period, she goes into a menses now again. ثُمَّ تَطْهُرُ. And then she goes into a clean period. In the second clean period, فَإِنْ شَاءَ أَمْسَكَهَا. If he so wishes, then he should hold on to her. وَإِنْ شَاءَ طَلَّقَهَا قَبْلَ أَن يُجَامِعْ. Or if he so wishes, then he should issue the divorce. Because now issuing the divorce is on the recommended modality, on the recommended mode. She's in a clean period. فَتِلْكَ الْعِدَّةَ الَّتِي أَمَرَ اللَّهُ أَن يُطَلَّقْ لَهَا النِّسَاءُ. That is the waiting period, or that is the time in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had commanded that if you want to divorce your wife, then you divorce your wife in that time period. In other words, in a tuhur, in a clean period. So now the question that you're naturally going to be asking yourself is that why did Abdullah ibn Umar have to wait for the second clean period? Because if he took her back and she was in the menses, a menses comes to an end and then she goes into a clean period. But the Prophet ﷺ says, wait out that clean period, then let her go into a menses again, and then when she goes into the second clean period, now if you want to divorce her, then divorce her. And if you want to hold on to her, then you hold on to her. So why the delay? So the scholars give a number of reasons in that particular regard. So they would explain now, وَاخْتُلِفَ فِي عِلَّةِ الْغَايَةِ بِتَأْخِيرِ الطَّلَاقِ إِلَى الطُّهْرِ الثَّانِي. So why the deferment? Why the delay? وَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ شَرْطًا. It's not a condition. Because if you were to divorce your wife in a clean period, then, or rather if you were to divorce your wife in a menses, I'm going to say to you, take your wife back and wait for the clean period. And then in the first clean period, you divorce her, and that would be a proper divorce. So why delay till the second? فَقِيلَ. The reasons given are as follows. There are a number of reasons given. لِأَلَّا تَصِيرَ الرَّجَعَةُ لِغَرَضِ الطَّلَاقِ لو طلق في الطهر الأول حتى قيل إنه يندب الوطء فيه. The one reason mentioned is that Abdullah ibn Umar divorced his wife in the menses. So he takes her back. And now the first clean period comes. And now he divorces her. What comes to mind is the only reason why he took her back is in order to divorce her again in a clean period. And that is something which is unbecoming. It's not a nice thing. So when he waits for that clean period to come to an end, and then she goes into a menses again, and then she comes into a clean period, then the distance between the divorce and taking it back is a big gap. And now we won't construe it necessarily as he only took her back to divorce her. Because if he took her back to divorce her, then he would divorce in the first clean period. But now it's the second clean period already. So you're able to almost like justify that the taking back wasn't for the divorce, even though in real terms it might very well have been that, but we're looking at the apparent of things. So if you look at the apparent of things, if he doesn't divorce her in the first clean period, but he waits for the second clean period, and then you no longer attach the taking back in order to give the divorce, and Allah knows best. وَقِيلَ عُقُوبَةٌ وَتَغْلِيظٌ. There's another reason which the ulama give, and they say that is not the general rule to wait for the second clean period. But the Prophet ﷺ wanted to taghlid, wanted to make things heavy upon him, because he did something very heavy. So the Prophet ﷺ is almost like a sort of a punishment, or uquba, a form of punishment, that since you divorced your wife in the menses, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let you wait longer in order for you to issue the divorce in the right time. So I'm not going to allow you to issue the divorce in the first tuhur, in the first clean period. You're going to issue the divorce in the second clean period. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So as a form of punishment. And, brothers okay with it? You follow the text. Understanding is clear, inshallah. Uquba. No. So, certain things are certain things within the Sharia that the consideration is taghlidan, to make things difficult in order for the person to learn a lesson. In order for the person to learn a lesson. I was asking Mullah Zakaria yesterday. A person has a bond. So is it permissible to give the person zakah in order to settle the bond? You follow the question. So Mullah mentioned to me that it depends. So it depends on the financing. It may well be that they have Islamic financing, and the financing is based on a diminishing musharaka, which means that you really only own the portion which the bank sells you annually, and you only owe that amount of money. Your debt doesn't go beyond that, because annually you enter into an arrangement whereby the bank sells you another portion going back. So it depends on that configuration. But the second configuration is a person, he's got a bond, but it happens to be a conventional bond. In other words, it's an impermissible bond. So now what's going to happen? Are we going to take zakah and give him the zakah in order to settle that bond? So one consideration is no taghlidan alayh. Because he took out a conventional bank, we're not going to avail zakah for him in order to pay that bond. Why? Because he doesn't have a debt? No, he has a debt. But some would argue that taghlidan, to make things difficult. Because you shouldn't have got into the conventional loan in the first place. By way of example, I'm trying to give you extraneous examples of taghlidan. Another example which we came about taghlid, and it's an approach, it's a legislative approach which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes and His Messenger takes. And in common law, you find the same type of consideration. So another extraneous example would be a drunk person. If he issues a divorce, does the divorce fall or not? The divorce falls. If he issues a divorce, but technically speaking, does he have the capacity to issue a divorce? He doesn't have the capacity. He doesn't have the contractual capacity to enact a divorce. So why do we still consider the divorce to fall? Taghlidan. He shouldn't have been drunk in the first place. And in that drunken state, he now issues a divorce. So taghlidan alayhi, to making things difficult. So here, again, another example of Ibn Umar. Yes, he takes her back and he gives the divorce in the first clean period. That's fine. But the Prophet ﷺ wants to make things difficult for him in order for him to learn a lesson. And therefore the Prophet ﷺ says, you have to wait not for the first clean period, but you have to wait for the second clean period. And this is a mode of legislation. It is a mode of tarbiyah also, of nurturing. Somebody does something and then من استعجل شيئا قبل أواني حرم بفقدانه. It relates to another principle that if somebody hastens something before its time, and then he will be punished by being deprived of the very same thing which he sought to hasten. So he wanted to give a divorce, he didn't wait for the clean period. So now what happens is, you are punished by having to wait longer. So that is the mode of tarbiyah, and Allah SWT knows best. It would fall, yes. It would fall. Remember yesterday we made a distinction between doing something which is impermissible. Something can be impermissible, albeit valid. For you to do it is impermissible. So for a person to divorce his wife in the clean period, it's impermissible. However, it's valid, meaning that there's consequences to it. If a husband divorces his wife while she's in the menses, what he's doing is impermissible. But that divorce in and of itself, is it valid? It's valid. What does validity mean? Validity means يَتَرَتَّبُ عَلَيْهِ آثَارُهُ, that it has certain consequences. They no longer consider the husband and wife. She now goes into her waiting period. And all of those rules fall into place. Why? Because the divorce is considered to be valid. And Allah knows best. I hope that answers the question, inshallah. Marhaban. So we go on to the next category, and the next category we alluded to, and I'm sure you understand the next category, but we'll read through the text inshallah bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالْبِدْعِيُّ الْمُحَرَّمُ, a type of divorce which is considered to be impermissible, haram. And yesterday we had spoken, and التكرار يعلم الحمار, repetition is beneficial for a student. So we again revisit what is meant by the term haram. What is meant by the term haram? Certain things you can't translate literally. You have to give like a euphemistic translation, especially to a Western audience, because Western audience prize themselves with being cognitively well endowed. You'll be rewarded if you stay away from it. But if you do it, you'll be punished. So this mode is very important. It is referred to as haram, and haram is a weighty term. So وَالْبِدْعِيُّ الْمُحَرَّمُ, the second mode which you could possibly issue a divorce or enact a divorce is referred to as bid'il muharram. And what is that? أَيُطَلِّقَ فِي الْحَيْضِ, that a person issues the divorce fil hayd while a lady is in a menses. She's experiencing menstruation. أي في أوله أو وسطه. So now the scholars would expand that now. An impermissible divorce is when a husband divorces his wife in a menses. But now when we look at menses, there's a start, there's an end, and there's a middle to it. So the ruling of impermissibility, of hurma, applies to the beginning and applies to the end. Now a lady, let's say she's bleeding as per normal, which would be an average of 7 days. The bleeding period is typically 6-7 days. So right at the end, towards the tail end of the 6th day and the beginning of the 7th day. So also what happens, a lady who experiences the menses, visibly there's a change in terms of the color of the blood, and her bleeding period is now coming to an end. The ruling of impermissibility doesn't extend to the very end. So in other words, if a husband is waiting for the clean period in order to issue the divorce in the recommended manner, and now his wife is right at the end, and he issues the divorce then it doesn't fall into the category of impermissible, it falls into the category of being recommended, the recommended mode. Right? So if a husband divorces his wife at the end of her bleeding period, then it is considered to be a clean period, in a sense that he won't be considered as having perpetrated an impermissible act. Now, بلا عوض منها. Now, here's also another very important consideration, that when a husband divorces his wife, it can fall into one of two categories. Either he issues the divorce, let's call it a standard divorce, and that is the husband says to the wife, "Talaqtuki, I divorce you." It's a straightforward divorce. However, he could enter into another arrangement as well, and that particular arrangement is referred to as a khula. Khula is when the husband issues a divorce in lieu of a recompense, in lieu of a counter value, a price, if you wanted to. In that particular instance, so the wife, by way of example, the wife wants a divorce. So the wife approaches the husband and says, "Divorce me." And let's say, "Divorce me, I'll return the bride money. You gave me 500 rands as bride money. So divorce me and I'll return the 500 rands." So what's happening here? The husband is issuing the divorce, but in lieu of a recompense. In our example, it is 500 rand. If that's the case, then talaq bid'i muharram doesn't apply. You with me? So let's say, for example, the wife is in the menses. She just started the menses. She approaches the husband and says, "Divorce me and I'll give you 500 rand." The husband agrees. He divorces her and she gives him the 500 rand. What do we term that divorce as? If there was no recompense, it would be haram. But since there's a recompense here, it is no longer considered to be haram. Can you think why? Why is it that if he gives the divorce without the recompense in the menses, then it's considered to be haram? But if there's a recompense, it's not considered to be haram. Because I think that's the obvious thing. She wants it. And when she's requesting it, the reason why it's not permissible for a husband to divorce his wife in a menses is because he's unduly prolonging a waiting period. And for you and me, it's not even considered prolonging. You see, when a husband divorces the wife in a clean period, then that clean period in which he divorces her, that first clean period is counted as her first tuhur in terms of her iddah. But if he divorces her when she's experiencing a menses, then what happens now? She's divorced, but in order for a waiting period, what does she do now? She has to wait for the menstruation to come to an end. Then she has to spend the full clean period as a first tuhur. And then she has to count another 2 tuhurs after that. So she's going to spend a longer iddah. And therefore it's prohibited. It goes against the grain of what we explained. Imsak bima'aruf, you hold on to your wife in a good way, or tasrihun bi ihsan, or you leave in a good way. Leaving in a way that you divorce her at a time that you are prolonging a waiting period, that is considered to be an act of injustice. We don't think much of it. But there are many things like that. تَحْسَبُونَ وَهِينَ وَوَعِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَظِيمٌ. We consider it to be insignificant, but by Allah it is a great thing. Are you with me? But now what happens is when the wife approaches the husband and she knows she's in the menses and she's asking for the divorce and she's willing to pay for it, it implies that she's happy to extend her waiting period. So if she's happy to extend the waiting period, and then the impermissibility falls away. The brothers follow. So she, in other words, it's not that the wife is being done in by the husband. It's basically on her request that is issuing the divorce, and she's requesting the divorce within the menses. So the fact that her waiting period is being prolonged is not due to the husband, but it's based on her request. So it doesn't constitute an act of injustice from the husband's side. Wallahu a'lam. نعم. بلا عوض منها إذا كانت مما يجوز أن تحبل والمعنى في التحريم تطويل العدة فإن كان بعوض فلا يحرم طلاقها لأن دفعها المال يدل على احتياجها للخلاص حيث افتدت نفسها بالمال بخلاف ما إذا سألت طلاقا بلا عوض لأنها قد تسأل كاذبة كما هو شأنهن ومن ثم لو تحققت رغبتها فيه لم يحرم أو اختلأ أجنبي فيحرم طلاقه إن وقع في الحيض لأن خلعها لا يقتضي اضطرارها إليه. So the bulk of what I'm mentioning now in Arabic has been explained, inshallah, and we'll basically conclude on that particular point. I'll retract 1, 2, 3 lines tomorrow, bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we'll explain that which was read and what not translated, bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khair al-jaza. We'll just hang around for about a few seconds or 30 seconds or a minute. They call it chilling out. Some call it blooming. Some say lam it out. People have different expressions. Marhaba. The recompense in khula can be or is decided between the husband and the wife. It doesn't necessarily have to be the bride money. It can be less, it can be more. Something which the husband and wife agree upon. And normally these things are also enacted in a judiciary. The judge will assist in that particular regard. Marhaba. Does there have to be a recompense when it comes to issuing a divorce? If the wife is requesting. Look, if the wife is requesting and then it remains the prerogative of the husband. A wife approaches the husband and says, look, I would like you to divorce me. So the one scenario is the husband complies and he says, I hereby divorce you. The divorce will be enacted. But normally, if it comes from the wife's side and then there's a khula arrangement, there's quite a bit of, if you think of a benefit, what happened was, I sat in the Sharia court once on one occasion. So there's a case, husband and wife. So the wife wants out of the marriage, right? So she's requesting the husband to issue a divorce. The husband doesn't want to issue a divorce. So in Sharia court, he's explained to me why he doesn't want to issue the divorce. He doesn't want further down the line. His kids are all young. When they grow up and they approach him and they say, but why did you divorce your wife? In other words, why did you divorce our mother? Are you with me? So he understands that his wife doesn't want to be in the marriage. And it takes two to tango. But he also doesn't want to issue the divorce because the divorce tells a particular story. And this is apprehension. So he doesn't know about khula. So because the lady wanted out, and there's no way to reconcile between the two of them, the lady was hell-bent on dissolving the marriage. So I said to him that you have an option in the form of khula. Because khula tells a different story. Khula says that the dissolution or dissolvement of the marriage was enacted by the wife. The wife made the request. So many times the monetary consideration is it's just a formal consideration. In certain instances, it's a very real consideration, but in cases that we've dealt with, is just a formality. But getting a talaq certificate and getting a khula certificate, it tells two completely different stories. So in the case that I mentioned to you now, years forward, if the children ask, then the husband says, no, I didn't divorce your mother. I didn't give her a talaq. We entered into a khula arrangement. Your mother wanted out. And because she wanted out, she gave X amount of money, and then I complied and I issued the divorce. The other thing also, which is like khula will come later on. We won't be able to cover it in our readings now. May Allah facilitate that we're able to continue in gatherings of knowledge. The other unique thing about khula is, remember when you issue a divorce, when the husband divorces, then the lady goes into the waiting period. Then can the husband retract and take the wife back in the waiting period? Yes, he can. But the same doesn't apply to khula. Khula. In other words, the wife paid. Let's say she paid 10,000 rands for a divorce. The husband issues the divorce, and in the waiting period, what does he do? Takes her back. So it's not permissible after entering into a khula arrangement for the husband to take his wife back. It's a baynuna sughra. They are separate. Despite the fact that she's still in a waiting period, they're completely separate. If they want to get back together, they must remarry and there must be a new bride money. The reason why we choose bride money is because dowry is an incorrect, in law they talk about a cognate expression. In other words, like mahar is the Arabic word. What's the cognate expression for mahar? It's not dowry. It's bride money. Because dowry is what the female gives to the male. A better translation would probably be labola, because that's what the husband gives to the wife. Wallahu a'lam. So we won't take much of your time, inshallah, bi'idhnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll read part of the letter, or we continue reading in the letter. No, it doesn't have to be cash. It can be kind also. It can be a usufruct also. In other words, whatever serves as a valid price or counter value in a sale will serve as a valid recompense when it comes to a khula arrangement. You just take his name down and tomorrow you catch him. Allah bless you and increase you in virtuous knowledge. Alhamdulillah. Mona Yahya is in stealth mode. He's checking out the students. Bismillah. فمن هذا الكتاب الجليل كتاب المختارات من مكتوبات الإمام الرباني السرهندي رحمه الله بقلم العلامة شيخ محمد أمين آر رحمه الله ونفعنا الله به وبكم إلى أن قال: وأيضا إن علوم هذه الطائفة علوم الأحوال، والأحوال مواريث الأعمال، فيكون الميراث من علوم الأحوال شخص قد صحح الأعمال وقام بحقها في كل حال، وتصحيح الأعمال إنما يتيسر إذا عرف الأعمال وعلم كيفية كل منها بلا إهمال. So Imam As-Sirhindi rahimahullah, Mujaddid al-Thani, he talks about a very important point. The brothers recall what we had discussed yesterday in terms of this, what appeared to now be a rather lengthy letter. The crux of the letter is the superiority of obligatory acts over recommended acts over supererogatory acts. There is no recommended act that can equate or equal to an obligatory act. So some of the, if you want to vicegerent, some of the khulafa were guilty of delaying Isha from its prescribed time to the end of the night. And the reason why they wanted to do that was, if they had the obligation of Isha, then they would remain awake and enliven the night with Qiyamul Layl. So he responded to that yesterday. What did he say? Number one, you shouldn't do that. He prohibited them from doing that, number one. Number two, he said that all the Isha that you prayed in its time to the end of the night, you must fulfill all of that. Because he quotes Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, left out an etiquette in terms of his ritual ablution. And then he repeated all of the prayers that he performed through that ritual ablution. So this was, and we explained yesterday, that's not necessary, shari'atan, but tariqatan, he imposed it upon them. But what solution did he give to them? That you're compromising Isha, which is a fard. You're compromising it by delaying it till just before Fajr. Don't do that. There's an alternative which you didn't think about. What was that alternative? According to the Hanafi madhab. Witr. That all you have to do is delay your witr. And witr, according to the Hanafis, is wajib. So you pray your Isha on time, and then you don't pray your witr. And the fact that you still need to pray your witr will serve as that impetus to keep you awake for the whole night. You don't have to delay your Isha. No. So he spoke quite a bit about the importance, and I think we did quite a few examples impressing upon us the importance of fulfilling al-fara'id first and foremost. Now, this morning in my litany also we read that verse, and I was thinking about the class. إِلَيْهِ يَصْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُ. What does it talk about? That your deeds are raised to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But your recommended deeds can only be raised if it's on the platform of the fulfillment of your obligatory deeds. So in other words, if you doing all the recommended acts, but you're not doing the compulsory acts, then there's no platform upon which your recommended acts can be raised, because there's no obligatory acts. The obligatory acts that serves as a platform to raise your recommended acts. Now, so he continues now. So this is very, very unique, because he's talking to a Sufi. And a Sufi's preoccupation is with spiritual works. You get two types of knowledge. Ilm al-Zahir and Ilm al-Batin. Knowledge that relates to the external limbs, and knowledge that relates to your internal. So it's a Sufi could very well be prone to dismissing that knowledge which relates to the external limbs, in other words, fiqh. You can be quite dismissive about it. Some, and I think perhaps erroneously, attribute to Imam Ghazali rahimahullah in his latter years, when he was asked about the cognitive sciences, like fiqh and usul fiqh and so forth, he responded by saying, don't remind me of my days of ignorance. That cannot be attributed to Imam Ghazali rahimahullah. Because a Sufi, like he is ka'in ba'in, as we explained, he is also Zahir and Batin. And a Sufi, when he starts off, he starts with the Zahir. And the Zahir is his doorway to the Batin. A person cannot claim to be developing esoterically when there's no exoteric manifestation of his Islam. It's not possible. You're with me? I don't know if that is clear. So coming from, you see, if you and I critique a Sufi, people will take exception. But this is Imam As-Sirhindi speaking. Mujaddid al-Thani. He's considered to be a Mujaddid, a renewer of the religion. So he has a very high ranking. So what does he say? He says the following. Inna uluma hadhi al-taifa ulum al-ahwal. The knowledge. So here we have a setting, and they're only reading books on spirituality. they're not reading books on fiqh. They're not reading any fiqh. So he tells them that you're not reading any books on fiqh. You're only reading spiritual works. Those spiritual works that you are reading, did you ever ask yourself exactly how beneficial that is? Based on the following. What does he say? وأيضا إن علوم هذه الطائفة علوم الأحوال. The knowledge of this group, when he talks about طائفة, he talks about the spiritual luminaries. Spiritual luminaries. That's another name that they give themselves, الطائفة. The knowledge of the spiritual luminaries is what? Is a knowledge related to their condition. It's a knowledge related to the condition. And how do you create a condition? A condition, if I think of an extraneous example, is like a reputation. If you have a reputation, can you show me your reputation? No, you have a reputation based on what? You conduct yourself in a particular manner, and your conduct leads to a reputation. So you have a reputation for always coming late. So this reputation of always coming late is an abstract thing that came up from where? From the fact that you're always late. So it's a condition, but the condition is tied into a particular action. You follow? So now the knowledge of the spiritual luminaries is the condition. This condition is a product of what? This condition is a product of the actions, not of the reading. Reading their works is not going to do much. It is really the condition which comes off from the actions that should be impactful on you. Now, وَالْأَحْوَالُ مَوَارِيثُ الْأَعْمَالِ. That conditions, the spiritual conditions, is an extension of one's deeds. فَيَكُونُ الْمِرَاث مِنْ عُلُومِ الْأَحْوَالِ شَخْصٍ قَدْ صَحَّ الْأَعْمَالِ وَقَامَ بِحَقِّهَا فِي كُلِّ حَالٍ. So if you want a condition, what do you need to do? You want a spiritual condition. And if a spiritual condition is a product of your actions, what must you do? You must busy yourself with the action number one. And if you want the better condition you want, the better your action must be. Because it depends on how valid your action is. So in other words, when you're making salah, you want a condition of being connected to Allah. You want a condition of proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know that that condition comes off from the action. So what must you do? You must rectify your action. And to the degree that you rectify the action, the concomitant, it's my teacher in so many different things, especially in English. Concomitant condition is going to be according to that. What does it impress upon us? The importance of your fiqh, of making sure you know the fiqh of salah. Because the better your act of salah is externally, in accordance to that is going to be the condition that you experience of spirituality within there. And if you don't have that, what you're experiencing is not true spirituality, it's something else altogether. No. وتصحيح الأعمال إنما يتيسر إذا عرف الأعمال وعلم كيفية كل منها بلا إهمال وذلك علم أحكام شرعي. And that is the knowledge of the shara, knowledge of the sharia. You want the tariqah? You must start off by having the knowledge of the sharia. And what is that? You must know your salah, you must know your fasting, you must know all of your fard acts. وعلم المعاملات, you must know your interactions. And I'm not faking this now. It's really written in the book. كالنكاح, like marriage, والطلاق, and divorce. So he's saying that you want conditions, you must first rectify your actions, not only your ritual acts of worship, all of your actions. The way in the mode you are married. If it comes to it, Allah forbid, that you must issue a divorce, it must be done in the proper way. Because all of these actions are going to result in a certain condition, your condition. So it reminds myself also, I complain about my condition. I want to rectify my condition. What must I do? I must start rectifying my actions. Because my condition is as a direct result of my actions. I'm depressed. Depression doesn't come out of anywhere. Depression comes due to either certain activity or inactivity. But there's something that you're doing that is resulting in this particular situation. وَعِلْمُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ أَوْجَبَهُ الْحَقُّ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى وهذه العلوم اكتسابية لا بد من تعلمها لكل أحد والعلم بين المجاهدتين. We'll stop on this one inshallah بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى. Sorry man, I took a bit more of your time today. because there was a janazah a little bit got extended. He says, this knowledge is all iktisabiyya that you must acquire. So in other words, you must make an effort to acquire this knowledge. It's not something that, you go to sleep at night and tomorrow morning you wake up knowing how to pray, how to fast, how to spend time in i'tikaf and so forth. No, it's knowledge that you must consciously earn. And then he says a beautiful thing, that knowledge oscillates between two efforts. In relation to knowledge, there's always two efforts that you must be making in relation to knowledge. What is the first one? في طلبه قبل حصوله. To seek knowledge. That's the first effort that you must make. The second effort is, once you've acquired the knowledge, is now to follow it up with actions. So in relation to knowledge, you're always going to be beset with these two efforts. You don't know something, you must make effort to acquire it. Once you know it, you must now make effort to practice upon it. And Allah SWT knows best. Now, he ends off by recommending a few works that can be read in terms of fiqh to this particular majlis. And then he tells him a very unique thing. He says, since the knowledge of the spiritual luminaries is tied into the condition, if it's tied in the condition, do you have to read any of their works? You don't have to read their works, because you become affected by the condition. So therefore he says, in your gathering, if you removed all of the spiritual works and you only read fiqh, it would be more beneficial for you. But then you might ask, but what about the spiritual reform of everybody sitting in front of me? Then he says that it's not the reading of the works that sees to the spiritual reform, it is your condition that will change them. Ya ayyuhalladhina taqullaha wa kunu ma'as sadiqin. You must be with the truthful ones. Why? Because when you come in the company, you become affected. Prophet ﷺ said, if you go into a blacksmithery, then you're going to come out smelling like smoke. If you go into the perfume shop, you're going to come out there smelling like perfume, even though you didn't purchase any perfume, whatever the case may be. But there was a condition, then you become affected by the condition. So if you're saying that you have to read the spiritual works in order to have an impact on those sitting in front of you, then we have an even bigger problem on our hands. Because you're supposed to have such a condition that your condition impacts those who come into that particular condition. So may Allah SWT rectify our states and rectify our conditions. And may our conditions be such that, it is good in and of itself, and it has the ability to impact those around us. May Allah SWT grant us the best of states, inshallah, bi'idhnillah SWT. تفضل. نقرأ بسرعة. هذا الدعاء نقرأ بسرعة، والدعاء الثاني كمان بسرعة.
ربنا انفعنا بما علمتنا، رب علمنا الذي ينفعنا، رب فقهنا وفقه أهلنا، وكرابة لنا في ديننا مع أهل الكتر أنثى وذكر، ربي ووفقهم لما ترتضي قولا وفعلا كرما، وارزق الكل حلالا دائما، وأخلا أتقياء علماء، نحظى بالخير ونكفى كل شر، ربنا وأصلح لنا كل الشؤون، وأكل ربي الرضا منك العيون، واقض عنا ربنا كل الديون قبل أن تأتينا رسل المنون، واغفر أنت أكرم من ستر، وصلاة الله تخشى المصطفى من إلى الحق دعانا والوفاء، في كتاب فيه للناس شفاء، وعلى الآل الكرام شرفاء، وعلى الصحب المصابيح الغرر، اللهم اهدنا بهداك، واجعلنا ممن يسارع في رضاك، ولا تولينا وليا سواك، ولا تجعلنا ممن خالف أمرك وعصاك، وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم، وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. يا ربنا اعترفنا بأننا اقترفنا، وأننا أسرفنا على لظى أشرفنا، فتب علينا توبة تغسل كل حوبة، واستر لنا العورات وآمن الروعات، واغفر لوالدينا ربي ومولودينا، والأهل والإخوان وسائر الخلان، وكل ذي محبة أو جيرات أو صحبة، والمسلمين أجمع، آمين ربي اسمع، فضلا وجودا منا لا باكتساب منا، بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سهول بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سهول بالمصطفى الرسول نحظى بكل سهول صلى وسلم ربي عليه عد الحب وآله وصحبه عداد طش السحب والحمد للإله في البدر والتنائم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين في كل لحظة أبدا عدد خلقه ورضا نفسه وزنة عرشه ومداد كلماته
وإلى حضرة النبي.
اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله وصحبه الفاتحة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ما شاء الله. تقبل الله. Allah accept and bless you all inshallah.